Hey guys, welcome back to World of Tanks. My name is Bruce and today I want to showcase how you can make it to silver in Onslaught in order to get the desired reward tanks, the KPZ-50T as well as the Concept 1B. Let's go. So this video will be divided into 3 chapters. First, I will give you my tank recommendation. Thereafter, I will tell you the most important tips and tricks alongside with some gameplay. And lastly, I will give you some kind of how to play the respective maps. This way, you only have to combine all this advice and you should be in good shape to succeed and maybe even make it to silver in this season. Now, yes, I am a little bit late with my tips and tricks for Onslaught. However, I wanted to reach silver first before I make a video and tell you how to reach silver, because otherwise I think it would be a little bit, not appropriate. So without further ado, let's jump into the first chapter. So as you can see, I reached silver and I got access to the desired bond tanks, or the desired reward tanks, like the KPZ-50T and also the Concept 1B. I only need to get a little bit more of the bonds in order to purchase those tanks. But let's start with my tank recommendation, and let's first of all take a look at the heavy tanks. So my absolute recommendation is the Polish 60TP. Due to its phenomenal armor, due to its punchy gun, and we'll talk about this later, but in Onslaught, in this season at least, the tanks are more precise because the base dispersion is reduced. So the gun in Onslaught of the 60TP is actually pretty precise compared to a random game. So use this tank if you have it. Now, other recommendations are the Super Conqueror. Yes, it got nerfed a little bit. It's still a superb ridgeline fighter with a good DPM. So take this tank if you are on a ridgeline. Now, I do not have the object 277, which is another recommendation due to its phenomenal speed on the battlefield. This tank combines a good turret armor, an okay hull armor if you play hull down with its limited amount of gun depression at least, but with the speed you will be able to reach critical positions very, very fast, and this is a distinct advantage over other tanks. Now, of course, you can also play the IS-7, which is simply an armor monster of a tank. Very difficult to penetrate if you can hide your lower plate. So if you have this tank, this is also suitable for Onslaught. And then besides those tanks, what I can recommend is, of course, the AMX M454. Once again, due to its armor profile. Now, the problem is if you're playing with this tank on an open map, you will get shots into the side, and the side profile of this tank is gigantic. This is kind of a weak spot of this tank. Plus, the high alpha gun only has 296 millimeters of penetration. This also limits this tank. But apart from this, this tank is well suited for Onslaught game mode. Now, you can play the mouse, which I also do not have in my garage, because this tank has the ability to heal itself, plus it has a gigantic amount of HP, which you can use for your team to buy your team time if you are in an inferior situation. So the mouse in some situations also works perfectly fine. And kind of the same tank is the object 275 Alpha. So this is also a super heavy tank, which works pretty nicely in Onslaught if you are trying to hold a position. And keep in mind the gameplay with those two tanks is relatively static. Now, some tanks that you certainly do not want to play, in general, tanks like the AMX 50B, tanks with no armor, tanks which are, I don't know, for example, the Reno Toronto. Yes, it is an autoloader tank, but the armor is simply not sufficient, plus the DPM is not sufficient. So do not play those tanks. I would also say that the armor profile of the VZ55 is not sufficient. So stick to the tanks that I just showed you and you will be successful. Now, as far as medium tanks go, I have two absolute go-to tanks. One of them is the STB-1. The STB-1 combines exceptionally good armor, at least if you're using your hull down capabilities and your full amount of gun depression. with an excellent DPM and with 330 millimeters of feet penetration. So with this tank you can brawl almost as good as with the Super Conqueror on a ridgeline, but you have the flexibility to relocate because this tank is much more mobile than a heavy tank. So an absolute go-to tank if you're playing, for example, on Westfield on a ridgeline map. Now, the other tank that you can play is the TVP 5051 due to its phenomenal autoloader. This tank has overall a very short clip reload, shorter than all the other autoloader tanks, and in Onslaught this is further reduced. So with this tank, if you hit 2 shots of your 4-shot autoloader clip, you will get access to this special feature, and you will only have in about 7 seconds or so reload time for your whole clip. So this gives this tank an insanely good firepower, and you can use this on multiple maps, and I will give you some gameplay shortly in which I showcase this tank. Now, of course, the downside is that you do not have any armor, but if you know what you're doing, this can be a very powerful tank. Now, what you can also use is the Object 230U due to its phenomenal armor, apart from the lower hull, which you can most of the time hide. Plus, this tank has the feature of a reduced gun reload time, which gives it an insanely strong DPM. So, alongside with its premium ammunition, which has 340 millimeters of feet pen, this tank is exceptionally good if you want to combine mobility with firepower in some kind of a, let's say yeah, on a particular Onslaught map, let's say it like that. Now, I would always play this tank and not switch to the E50M due to the fact that, yes, this tank has more gun depression, but if I want to play a tank which is suitable for a map which in which I want to play hull down, then I would prefer the STB1 for the reasons I just told you. Now, on the other hand, the armor profile of the E50M is not as good as the Object 430U. Plus, on Onslaught, everybody will shoot premium ammunition, so armor is what really counts. So, in my opinion, you should prefer the Object 430U over the E50N. So, one thing, again, to the hull down tanks. Now, as I said, this is my go-to tank. The Centurion Action X is also a pretty decent tank, but due to the fact that the upper hull is not as strong as on the STB1, if you're playing hull down, even if you're playing hull down, I should say, I would always prefer the STB1 over the Centurion Action X. Don't get me wrong, this is also a superb tank and you see it on the battlefield. However, in my opinion, the STB1 is just a tiny touch better. Now, please do not play the UDES 1516. In my opinion, it's not a bad tank per se. However, mobility wise, it is not as good as the Centurion Action X and also not as the STB1. Plus, the alpha is of course a bit higher than on the STB1, but the DPM is lower, and what you need on Onslaught is you need raw firepower and especially DPM, because you want to out DPM the other tanks as soon as possible, because as soon as you can take one tank out of the battlefield, then your team has a distinct advantage. So go to those tanks, STB1, maybe Centurion Action X. However, I would prefer this one, especially TVP. Please do not play tanks like the WoT 65, tanks like the Badger, all the other autoloaders, because they have a much longer reload time, and so this tank has a clear advantage in this Onslaught season due to this very, very short clip reload time if you use this special feature. Now, as far as TDs go, what I can only recommend is play TDs which have armor. So play assault TDs like the Minotauro. As you can see, I did not play this tank. I don't have a crew, I don't have equipment on this tank, so I did not play this tank. However, if you want to play a tank and if the map is suited for an assault TD, so if a map is not open and if you cannot get easily flanked by tanks like the TVP that I just showed you, then you can play a Minotauro. You can also play a T110E3 due to its phenomenal armor. and I do not have this tank in my garage either. So you can play this tank, and you can also play the Russian object 2684 due to its phenomenal armor. Now, this tank also has a wonderful special feature, but what you do not want to do is you do not want to play glass cannon TDs like, for example, the Gorilla. I would also consider the Jagdpanzer E100 as not sufficient for Onslaught due to the very poor DPM, due to some drawbacks in its armor. For example, the upper glacier here can be penetrated with heat, and as I said, everybody will play heat and will play premium ammunition in Onslaught, so I cannot recommend this tank. Now, please do not play tanks like an FV or other tanks. You want to be engaged as soon as possible in the fight, so you want to play an assault TD with enough armor with which you can brawl in the battle. So go along if you need to play in TD. Only play it on certain maps. Play it on maps which are not open, where you cannot get flanked easily by tanks like a TVP. And then if you play TD, please play assault TDs. Yes, I have seen players playing in a Gorilla and making 6k damage, but this only happens if you are an exceptionally well player, so a super unicum with a WTR of 8000 plus, and if you play on a map in a very specific place which lets you deal damage. But other than that, those tanks will simply be inferior, and they will be a hindrance for your team to win the game. And lastly, light tanks. Light tank is a tricky thing. In my opinion, in general, you should not play light tanks, except if you really know what you are doing. And yes, I think I am an above average light tank player. However, I think that I personally am not strong enough in order to play light tanks in Onslaught. You should be an exceptionally well player before you take light tanks out on the battlefield in Onslaught. So I cannot recommend to play light tanks, as I said, except if you are a super unicum and if you exactly know what you are doing. Now, tanks that you can play if you're such a player are the AMX 13105, and then also the Rheinmetall Panzerwagen due to its phenomenal gun, and then maybe also the EBR 105. But as I said, in general, I would rather play a medium tank, because a medium tank combines firepower with some armor, and more often than not will teams which simply do not bring enough firepower, enough raw firepower, talking about the TVP for example, or armor to the fight, those teams will in general lose because of the disadvantage they bring to the fight. Alright, first game, we are spawning on Easter Bay, and let's first of all take a look at the map and see what options you have on this map. Playing Onslaught on Easter Bay, there are really multiple options. In my opinion, the artillery strike right here is super important, and you should try to get access to this point via a fast heavy tank or a medium tank which is heavily armored. You can play heavy tanks and maybe even assault TDs. However, this is an open map, so it's not too much made for assault TDs. But you can also perfectly play fast mediums and try to go here, get this artillery point, maybe flank opponents like so. And yeah, so there are multiple options on Easter Bay. So in this game, I decide to use the object for 30U due to its combination of firepower, armor, and then also mobility. Above average mobility if you compare to other heavy tanks. So let's start with my first tip for Onslaught in order to reach silver rank. And this sounds benign, but I really mean it, and I really recommend to try it out. So Onslaught is the most competitive game mode, and in general those modes like ranked battles or Onslaught or modes that will appear in the future are the most competitive modes in World of Tanks. So you need to be on your A game, and the longer you play, usually the more fatigue you get and the worse your performance gets. So in consequence, my tip is try to slowly but steadily progress, i.e. if you have gained, let's say, 50 or 80 points, just quit the game, get a good rest and start over again, maybe the next day or later the day. This is a subjective tip, but it has worked out very nicely for me. Okay, so in this situation, I am very unlucky because I get pushed by 2 tanks, a situation which you never want to have in World of Tanks, but a good example in order to showcase this firepower advantage that you get with the Object 430U and also the E50M if you press the 7 key and have access to your special feature, which lets you significantly reduce your reload time. And this boosts your DPM to above 5k or maybe even 6k, and you can really dominate other opponents. And if you can, just like you can see here, I'm trying to hit the weak spot of the 60 TP, which is below the turret, on the turret ring. That's the only portion that I can reliably penetrate, at least if I do not hit the gun, like in this situation. Now I'm down to being one-shottable. I'm trying to hide the weak spots of my turret with my gun, with elevating my gun. And in this situation I was very lucky, and this is basically not how you should play Onslaught, but I tried to secure this important artillery position for my team because I feel that this artillery strike position on the heavy lane is super important. Because from here you can get shots into the adversary base, as you can see. And can I get another shot? Maybe. Here you go, I can at least track him. And so this is a very important position if you want to win the game. This is why I try to secure this position. And yeah, I am lucky because I managed to stay alive with the help of my team. We could take out multiple adversary tanks, and now we're on the winning side. The game is won, and we simply want to try to get more damage. Now, as I said, I wouldn't go so far to say that, you know, you need to play the heavy lane on this map in order to win the game. You can also be super successful if you encircle your adversary tanks, if the adversary team. But you have to know what you are doing, and it also depends on the situation and on the tanks that the adversary team chooses and on the tanks that your team chooses. And so both can be successful, but I wanted to show you this kind of gameplay because securing the artillery position in the very north is very beneficial on this map. Alright, second game. This time we spawn on Airfield. And on this map I like to use a heavy tank, but let's first of all take a look at the map and see what options we have. Airfield is a map where heavy tanks are pretty important because it's all about this middle, plus there are multiple options to side scrape, to play hull down, and so to defend flanking medium tanks. In my opinion, the radio spot here is not of too much of importance. And the chances are that a tank which goes to this position right here is out of the game and has no option to further proceed into the middle. So in my opinion, this position here is basically a position that you should not play. You can play a hull down medium tank and try to get the artillery spot here. However, this is also risky gameplay, and most of the time I found that the team which is stronger with heavily armored or heavy tanks wins the game. So in my opinion, the middle is the most important spot on Airfield. So here we are with the 60 TP. And my tip number 2 is go premium or go home. So as far as equipment goes, you need to use premium ammunition. Not 100% because of the characteristics of some shells. For example, heat shells will not penetrate objects and sometimes even have a slower shell velocity. But in general, you need to fire premium ammunition in order to be competitive. And I also recommend to use large repair kits, large first aid kits, and also an automatic fire extinguisher. I found that premium consumables do not bring me too much of an advantage, so I simply did not use them. But in general, you need to use premium ammunition because you need to be competitive and you need to be able to penetrate the armor of the adversary tanks. The more reliable you can do that, the better it is. for you to win the game. So as you can see, I'm not playing too offensively because I want to see what the adversary team is doing here in the game. The Super Conqueror is able to penetrate me, so I need to fall back even further. Now he pushes around the corner. That's usually what you do not want to do in Onslaught. You do not want to play too aggressively because you will get... Okay, here. Oh, nice. And... Yay, an ammo rack. 3k damage onto the 60 DP because we ammo racked him. Okay, that was super lucky. And yeah, of course, I'm showcasing this review. We were talking about equipment. So besides the premium ammunition and also consumables, not consumables, but you know, first aid kit and also repair kit. In Onslaught, what you have to know is the base dispersion of tanks is reduced significantly, i.e. even tanks with an unprecise gun are now relatively precise, for example the 60 TP. So for you this means that you do not need to make the gun more accurate, in general at least, depending on the tank. You rather want to make your tank more mobile, i.e. you want to play your tank with a turbo instead of a vertical stabilizer, as I said, in general. You need to definitely increase the firepower, i.e. you want to play your tank with a gun rammer and then maybe with vents as opposed to optics, as view range is normally not so important due to the fact that the fight might take place only at a single crucial spot instead of the whole map as it does in random battles. Now this might change in the future, so I recommend to check out the specialities of the next game mode, the next competitive game mode after Onslaught, and then set up your tanks accordingly. But as of now in Onslaught, that's how you want to set up your tanks. So back to the game. So we played a bit defensively. We brought armor and firepower to the fight. Our team was very good at playing in the middle at the crucial spot. We could overwhelm the enemy forces which played too aggressively, which you in general should not do. And then we could take out one or another tank. And as soon as you can take out, let's say, 2 tanks, you have a, you know, such a distinct and great advantage that usually the excuse me, usually the adversary team will not recover out of such a situation. So that's what you want to do in Onslaught. You must not play too aggressively, but we'll come to this in the next replay. Let's first of all try to finish off the mouse. Here you go. And as you can see, the mouse in a 1v1 fight is not so strong simply due to the sluggishness of the tank and due to the lack of mobility and agility of this tank. However, it is good certainly for trying to hold a position, and also okay, unfortunately I do not hit the lower hull. It also has the feature of healing itself, which makes it, sorry, super strong alongside with its gigantic HP pool. But yeah, the game is won. Of course, we were super lucky because in the end we actually only made what is it, 3.7k damage, and the 2,700 remaining damage of the 60 TP was simply due to the fact that we ammo wrecked this tank. But yeah, let's jump into the next game. Alright, next map. This time we spawn on Outpost, and let's first of all take a look at the map and see what options we have. Outpost is a map which I really liked when playing Onslaught. In my opinion, the southern portion, the southern part of the map is pretty much useless, and you should combine all your forces to go to the north, to this position right here. Not only is the middle super important, and keep in mind on Onslaught you have access to the middle like so, and also here. And you really have to win this position right here, so you need to have an advantage when it comes to the number of tanks proceeding to the north. So on Outpost you can play fast medium tanks like the TVP especially well. You can also play heavy tanks. However, in my opinion, I saw tactics where players went to the cap circle with a heavy tank like the mouse or the object 705 alpha, but in my opinion this is not a good gameplay because you are out of the game and you are unable to help your teammates to win this portion here in the north. And I also saw people basically going to the south, but then in my opinion, once again, you are also out of the game. Now, despite this, you can play, as I said, heavy tanks, medium tanks, and even assault TDs, because this portion right here is kind of a the opposite of an open map. So yeah, multiple options on Outpost. So on this map, I like to play the TVP, and this instantaneously brings me to tip number 3, which is kind of the golden tip for Onslaught. You must not play over aggressively. You will lose games and you will win games. So in order to progress, you need to make more points in the games where you win than losing points in the game where you lose. And the only way you can achieve this is if you make a decent amount of damage even if you lose. So you do not want to throw away a tank at the very beginning, and that's exactly what you see me doing here. Now, because I have the support of the STB and another TVP T5051 and also of the slower T57 Heavy and the IS-4, I am aggressively pushing into this position. But without this support, I would never do this. And even in this situation, I was kind of hesitant, and I did not want to go on my own to this position. So don't play over aggressively in Onslaught, because it will not be successful and you will not you know, gain points more than you lose. So that's super important, because if you play over aggressively, once again, you will get taken out here and there, and this will overall lead to the problem that you will not lose, that you will lose more points that you can gain in your good games. So now we have information of every other tank in the game, and that's why we want to make pressure and fall into the rear of those tanks. Now I'm using the reload feature of the TVP 5051, which makes it an exceptionally strong tank, as I described earlier. Of course, I'm shooting full premium because I want to reliably pen the mouse. And now as the mouse is turning his turret, I want to fall back into cover. But now as I have reloaded, and keep in mind, I'm focus firing the mouse because I want to take out one tank. Instead of making damage to multiple tanks, I want to make damage on one single tank in order to create an advantageous situation in which we can take out adversary tanks as soon as possible. So let's reduce the HP of this tank and take him out. And now the remaining... Okay, this is what I meant earlier. Of course, the heat shell doesn't penetrate an object. And so that is a disadvantage. And so, yeah, with this gameplay, we were able to win this flank. And now we are 4 versus 2. And now we have to see what we can do in order to take out the remaining tanks which were playing in the south. Of course, as those tanks had an advantage in the south, they could take out our 2 remaining tanks. However, we are now in a situation of advantage that we need to exploit. So once again, no time for over aggressive gameplay, but we want to consciously see what we can do in order to further reduce the HP of the adversary tanks and maybe even take out some tanks. Now, as I have the support of the IS-4, I want to push here. I'm still full HP. And I want to get a shot. Let's stand still. Let's aim in and bang at least one shot onto this tank. Okay, one T-51 is in the middle, fighting against 2 of our heavy tanks. Okay, so it is time to make a flanking move. Now, here you go. There's the radio spot of the adversary team. So one tank is here in this position. It's yep, it's the TVP 5051. And then the question is, where's the remaining Leopard? So, of course, now we do not want to lose any further time, because I'm still full HP and I donked this shot. I should not have taken this shot. Fortunately, the IS-4 can take out the other TVP, and now I have to trade my HP as soon as possible in order to take out those tanks. They want to get an artillery spot, so let's try and see whether we can spot an adversary tank, which is not the case. So we instantaneously want to proceed to the arty spot, and now I need to focus fire maybe the Leopard 1 in order to take him out. So let's see, here we go, and bam, bam, and now this is what good players do. So the TVP T5051 is shielding the Leopard 1 in order to make sure that he remains in the game. That's what you should do. If you have more HP than your teammate, you need to shield him in order to make sure that he remains in the game. And I see that too seldomly in Onslaught, because good players will focus a tank which is already low HP in order to take him out, in order to create an advantageous situation for your team. So the opposite is true in order to deny the adversary tanks of doing exactly this. So what you need to do is you need to shield your tank which is low HP and take damage so that both of your guns remain in the game. That is how you can win. That is a crucial, let's say, step or a crucial part of winning Onslaught games. And now I think our E100 creates an arty shot onto the radio point and takes out the Leopard 1. So in the end, we win this game. Okay, next game. This time we are spawning on Ghost Town. And let's first of all take a look at the map and see what options we have on this map. Playing Onslaught on Ghost Town, you once again have multiple options. You can perfectly play heavily armored heavy tanks and also TDs right here in the middle, simply because you can hide from flanking medium tanks, which can and will flank you once you brawl in the city. Now, you can also play medium tanks and not only fast tanks with no armor like the TVP, but you can also play hull down tanks, because this portion here is perfectly well suited for hull down gameplay. Now, I like to play medium tanks, and I like to get this artillery spot and then flank into the city and fall into the rear of the heavy tanks. Now, what you should not do is you should not go to the radio spot, which is here and then also here, because it offers no armor whatsoever. And as soon as the adversary the adversary team sees you starting to get the radio control point, you will get blind shotted and most likely lose HP that you need later on in the game. So on this map, once again, I like to use the TVP due to its firepower. And in the previous game, we talked about not playing over aggressively. However, the opposite is true as well. You need to be engaged into the fight. So don't be the medium tank hiding and entering the fight after 2 or 3 tanks of your team have been killed. It's a fine line, and yes, it takes much experience. However, it is crucial to be engaged as soon as possible. This is why playing medium tanks and especially light tanks is more difficult than playing heavy tanks, because you must not miss the, let's say, the window of being engaged into the fight. As you can see, we're playing aggressively on this flank, and we only can do this because we have the support of, or I have the support of 2 more medium tanks. Now, as you can see, the adversary team is not playing this flank at all, and so we now must make the decision to be engaged into the fight, because the 4 heavy tanks of our team in the city will need our support as soon as possible. So that's why I am taking the shortcut now into the city. I'm trying to set the artillery strike onto this position, hopefully damaging also the 60 TP, which is not the case, unfortunately. And now I want to enter the fight and to incorporate my clip as soon as possible. I get spotted, which is not good, so I want to fall back, because after all, what you want to do in an autoloader tank is you want to enter the fight by surprise. Now let's see, do I still get spotted? No? Okay. Okay, the 60 TP goes into the middle, so once again, I need to enter the fight as quickly as possible. I cannot afford to simply drive around where in the meantime our heavy tanks are losing HP. This is a typical mistake of medium tank drivers, and so as you can see, the adversary team is playing super aggressively. Now, yes, I tanked the shot from the 60 TP. Okay, there's the 50 TP. That was kind of unexpected by myself, so I need to fall back. However, I delivered at least 1000 damage into the battle, and we are rather on the late side, and our 2 medium tanks in the north are not doing a great job of you know, flanking too much and losing too much time. So I want to help my team to take out the 60 TP. Nice. And we can take him out. Excellent. So let's go into the reload and let's try to help our team as much as we can. Now, fortunately, our heavy tanks are doing a great job in the city, maintaining alive. And we now, okay, that is a very bad situation right here now. Our own tanks are shielding us. And you know what? Somewhat, I need to, okay, mouse, that is a very bad job what you're doing. I try to, to track this tank, which was not successful. Fortunately, our two medium tanks, except I mean, maybe except for the STB, have now entered the fight finally, and so we are now still in an advantageous position. However, once again, we need to hurry up and exploit the situation. Okay, here you go. I wanted to make a flanking maneuver. The STB-1 does the same. Fortunately, I do have the clip, so I have the firepower advantage in order to take this tank out. And now, once again, use the feature of the TVP 5051, go into the reload the full clip, and then flank the adversary heavy tanks and focus fire in order to take them out. So here you go. Let's take out the TD, the T110E4, and now the game is about to be won. However, we want to still play cautiously, because as you can see, the AMX is turning around its turret. And so, can we get, yeah, maybe 2 shots? Nice, 2 shots. Now we want to go into the reload, and then we want to expose our tanks once the turrets of the 2 remaining tanks do not face us, because we do not want to get taken out because we're low HP, okay? So that's what we want to do, and now we can, of course, exploit the situation once again. Fall back because we do not want to get taken out. And this is how you can win games in Onslaught. Alright, last game that I want to showcase you. This time we are spawning on Klondike, and let's first of all take a look at the map and see what options we have. Playing Onslaught on Klondike, I hope this is the correct pronunciation. In my opinion, you should concentrate to the south. Heavy tanks will fight here, and in my opinion, it makes sense for a medium tank player to go here, especially with a tank which lets you play hull down, and then try to win access to this portion here in order to create a crossfire situation and help your team to win the south. In my opinion, the northern portion is rather not important, and instead of going here and wasting time, you should instantaneously go to the south and support your heavy tanks, either with playing a heavy tank like so, maybe an assault TD also helps, or with, as I said, a medium tank to go here and, as I said, to help to win the southern portion of the map. This is how I think playing this map makes the most sense. So on this map, I like to play the STB-1 simply because I like to have the mobility of a medium tank, the firepower of a medium tank, and also the armor of, let's say, a somewhat heavy tank. And I can find lots of hull down positions where I can exploit the strength of the STB-1. So tip number 5 is, in general, it is important to take out tanks as soon as possible, and I think I have showed this multiple times now in this video. So whenever possible, try to overwhelm an opponent. And that's exactly what I want to do. The heavy tanks are driving to the south, to the typical, let's say, heavy area, which is completely understandable and the right thing to do. And I want to go into the middle. Fortunately, I have the support of 2 other medium tanks, so I can instantaneously push here. And now we can create a crossfire situation and try to take out other heavy tanks. So, you want to, as I said, try to overwhelm an opponent. And if you see one of your teammates fighting against one single tank, then try to help them, and try to create a 2v1 situation to take out this tank. This is exactly what we are doing now on a bigger scale, with being 7 tanks all together on a spot fighting against, 4 tanks of the adversary team. Now, keep in mind, if you are fighting in, let's say, a 2v1 situation, most likely one of your teammates is fighting in a 1v2 situation, and you need to hurry up in order to not lose too much time for your team in which your teammates are inferior. As you can see, of course, the other team is now recognizing that we have all our tanks here in the south, and so they are trying to turn around and trying to fall into the rear of our team. However, we of course are paying attention, and we are expecting this behavior, and we are turning around in order to yeah, take on the fight against those tanks. So those tanks are isolating themselves, which is good for us. And as you can see, we are now making exceptionally well gameplay, the two SDB1s, because we are facing... Oh, nice, that was lucky. We are facing this tank, and we are using the strength of the medium tank, which is the mobility, in order to fight against the turret traverse speed of the heavy tanks, in order to win the fight against them. And now, as you can see, I want to, once again, create a 2v1 situation instantaneously in order to help my team to take out tanks. Unfortunately, this VZ could take out the SDB1, which is bad, but now I need to continue to make pressure onto this tank, because yes, I will take damage, but I wanted to take him out. Now, of course, I do not want to take, let's say, 3 shots of those 2 tanks, so now I need to fall back. But in general, what you want to do is you want to create advantageous situations, so 2v1 situations, and then get those kills instantaneously in order to help your team. Now I want to evade out of the situation and use my mobility to get rid of those 2 tanks, the 60TP and the VZ55. Instead, I am once again joining my heavy tanks in order to create an advantageous situation on this side of the map, and then thereafter we have 1 tank in advance in order to then refocus onto the other tanks. So that is how you want to play Onslaught. That's the flexibility that is required when playing Onslaught. And now our 3 tanks can refocus onto the VZ and the 60TP. Meanwhile, we can flank around and then always create this advantage of having 1 more gun in the game. Now, unfortunately, the VZ55 went into the cap circle, not to the position where the 60TP went, because then I would be able to fall into the rear of those 2 tanks, which would be the best choice. Okay, this artillery strike was not accurately set, unfortunately. And now I think I am in a situation in which I want to consciously trade HP, because it looks like our teammates are not winning against the 60TP. Plus, I think I have enough HP remaining. Of course not, yeah, of course not enough HP to take 2 shots, but at least to take 1 shot, and so I consciously trade my HP in order to take out this tank, and now we can create, once again, the advantageous position. Of course, our 2 teammates should be able to win the fight against this tank, but yeah, let's make it super safe, and let's arrive at this position, and let's help them in order to win the game. So yeah, I think if you follow those tips, you will be more successful in Onslaught, and you will eventually reach silver rank. And let's now take a look at the remaining maps that you can encounter in Onslaught. Okay, another map that you can encounter in Onslaught is Cliff. And in my opinion, the most important side of the map is the one in the south. And you will find at least some of your players playing in this position. And in my opinion, if you can overwhelm the enemy forces on this side, then you will win the game, and you can create this wonderful advantageous situation in which you have more tanks than the adversary team. I also encountered situations in where my team was focusing on the south. Meanwhile, we had strong adversary heavy tanks just capping us out, but that's, you know, that happens from time to time. I would not go to the very east side of the map and not try to get this, I think, artillery strike. But I would focus on this area and help your team. So what I see most of the heavy tanks do, and I think it's the correct gameplay, is they push down to this position like so. So what I used to do, I try to take a fast tank, the TVP, and proceed to the south, to the west. It's always the west. If I talk about the south, I mean this western portion. So with the TVP, I proceed to the west like so. Not only do I maybe spot tanks which are in this position, and of course vice versa, if I proceed from the northern spawn to the position like so, then I can spot tanks in this position or in this position. This gives our team a good information about what the adversary team is doing, and then arriving here, I can create a wonderful crossfire situation, because let's say the tanks from the adversary team are proceeding like so, then they have to focus sorry, excuse me, they have to focus tanks which are coming from this side of the map, and then I can create this wonderful crossfire situation. Cut this out. And with this crossfire situation, we can then manage to win this position. This also gives us access to not only the radio point here, but also the artillery point here. And then we can focus on, you know, clearing up the picture of the remaining tanks, which are most likely in this position somewhere around the cap circle. Next map is Elal, and in my opinion, it's all about this position here in the north. You should not spend too much time to get access to the radio point, which is right here, or right here in this in those two positions, because the fight will take place somewhere around here, and that's not a surprise. So go to this position and try to help your team to take out adversary tanks as soon as possible. Do not go to the cap circle, but try to help your team right here. If you have a fast tank like the Object 277, you can go to this position and try to create a crossfire situation. Let's say if you are spawning right here on this spawn, then if you manage to win this position, you can basically take tanks which are in this position under fire from here, and so can your tanks which are here in this position. So this can be a very strong gameplay, but you can only do this if you have enough tanks and the tanks which are suited for this. So for example, fast heavy tanks like the Object 277. In general, I like to play the STB1 due to the flexibility, and I like to go to the standard position either here if I'm spawning on this side of the map, or I like to go to this position if I spawn on the southern side, and then simply see how the game develops. Once again, it's all about creating an advantageous situation in which you can take out adversary tanks, and then this gives you a firepower advantage for your team that you can exploit. So instead of going to the cap circle or wasting time with proceeding somewhere into the south, or wasting time with going to the radio point, try to man those positions here in the north and try to help your team to win the northern side. And then if you have this advantage, you can further exploit the situation and win the match. Next map is Ensk, and Ensk is a tricky one. In my opinion, you should bring armor to the fight. So take out super heavy tanks, bring TDs, assault TDs to the fight. Maybe play with medium tanks if they have good armor. But in general, I found that you should rather play on the eastern side of the map. So basically try to win this position. Maybe try to create crossfire situation from here. And also then from here, or if you're playing in the south, from here and from here. Don't play too aggressively, because I found that you can get pushed out of such a situation, not only because of advancing heavy tanks in this portion, but also let's say if your team leaves the cap circle to the side, and if the adversary team is able to push here, then you can also get cross shots onto your tank from this position. So I'm not the perfect Ensk guy. I lost quite some games on Ensk. I think it is beneficial to bring armor to the fight, and I think it is also beneficial to play rather the east than the west. I've never seen games in which it was beneficial to, play a medium tank and then flank and get those radio and RT points and so on and so forth. But this might work out as well. All in all, I think this is a map where armor and firepower, i.e. heavily armored tanks, really can make the difference. Mines is another tricky map. Now, you will find lots of players who try to play fast medium tanks and then rush the hill and try to win the hill. Now, I did the same, and then I discovered that this is a too risky gameplay, an over-aggressive gameplay in which you, from time to time, throw away your tank without making any damage, and this doesn't lead to success in Onslaught. And then I discovered a very smart gameplay of a team which won the game even by not winning the hill. So what do I recommend? I recommend to not push the hill. Instead, I recommend to push into such a situation with a tank which has not a too long reload, because you need to be ready to take cross shots onto this position once the adversary tanks rush onto the hill, trying to, you know, decrease the hit points of those tanks. You can go to this position from the north or to this position from the south. And then if you see that the adversary remaining tanks have managed to win the hill, sorry, what you want to do is you want to fall back and then go to the south, because not only are you safe on this side of those rocks here from the hill, sorry, but you can also get the artillery strike and then flank around and get shots into the rear of the heavy tanks which are brawling in this position. Of course, you need to have brawling heavy tanks in this position. They should play a bit more defensively, but this is how you can basically make a winning move on this map. I would not recommend to get the arty strike on this position, because you're simply out of the game too much. And plus, if you are a medium tank, you should not waste time to, you know, flank around into this area here or into the northern area here. But as I told you, you need to be engaged into the fight as soon as possible and create an advantage situation. So this is my recommendation for playing mines. Next map is Overlord. And Overlord is once again a tricky one. It really depends on what your team is doing. Now, in general, I think it is advantageous to fight from the top down to the bottom. So the top side being this portion right here, and the lower side, I should say, from the higher ground in the east to the lower ground in the west. However, this really depends on what your team is doing. So if your team is heavily fighting here in the south, then do not go to the north, because chances are that you will be outnumbered and you will get taken out. So once again, it comes down to the point of playing of not playing too over aggressively. So if you find yourself in a disadvantageous situation in a medium tank, then you do not want to play aggressively here, but maybe set up a defensive position like so or like so, in order to reduce the HP of the aggressive medium tanks of the adversary team. Now keep in mind that things can change relatively quickly in Onslaught, so you need to fall back instantaneously. What you can of course always do, and I found that to be somewhat successful, you can create let's say a team of heavy tanks and then shield yourself into all other directions and simply overwhelm other heavy tanks with your raw firepower. So Overlord, I would say, is a very flexible map, and it really depends on the situation and on what your teammates are doing. Alright, next map is Pilon, and in my opinion, you have two choices on Pilon. You can either proceed to the heavy brawling area with your heavy tank, maybe also to this rock here in the middle. However, you have to be cautiously, because what players like I do is I select the TVP and I like to go to either this position right here or to this position right here. There I come to a standstill and see whether the adversary team takes the radio point, which is over here or here. So if I see that the radio point is taken, I empty the full clip into this radio point in order to deny the usage of this radio point, and in order to decrease the amount of HP of this respective tank. Then further on, depending on the support of my team, I like to push into this position, because from here I can get crossfire onto this position. So that's why this position is super dangerous for a heavy tank, and I do not recommend to push this aggressively, because as I said, playing over aggressively in Onslaught usually is not successful, at least in the long run. So with the TVP, I like to go to this position right here, and then depending on the situation, I like to continue to flank the heavy tanks and then get crossfire, let's say from here onto this position, or vice versa from here to this position. So I like to use fast medium tanks like the TVP in order to flank the heavy tanks. Now, Pilon is a typical map where either your heavy tanks are superior because the other team has more medium tanks. In this case, you as a medium tank player, you want to play more defensively, and then the opposite is true as well. So either play a heavy tank right here or play a medium tank, and I would highly not recommend to play you know, TDs, maybe an assault TD if you are trying to fight in this position, but other than that, go to the normal heavy tanks and also the fast and regular medium tanks, I would say. Alright, Redire is a map which offers lots of hull down opportunities. So in my opinion, you should take a hull down tank, and I would prefer the STB1 as being a very mobile, hull down strong tank. So in my opinion, the western portion of the map, so this portion here, is more important than the east. So please do not go to this side of the map, because most of the time, or most likely, you will be out of the game for a too long period of time. Now, some tanks try to rush the artillery spot in this position, which I do not recommend, simply because it's an over-aggressive gameplay. But I want I would go to this position from this side, maybe to this position from this side, and then simply see what happens. Of course, the classic mechanics on this map apply. So if you're spawning in the north, you can go to the ditch if you don't get pushed out by overwhelming adversary forces in this position. And from this position right here, you can get crossfire onto this position right here, creating an advantageous situation for your team. The opposite is, of course, as well true. Now, yeah, this is a map where you can play, let's say, defensively, see what the adversary team is doing. You do not want to be out of the game, as I said, for example, in this position. So do not hope to, you know, play a TD and snipe from this position onto tanks which are here, because this is not what will happen in Onslaught, because players are simply playing more smarter than in the random battles. So pick a tank, concentrate on this side of the map, and then play defensively and see what is developing in this particular game. Sand River is another map which I like to play on during Onslaught, and in my opinion, the best position is in the north. It offers tons of hull down positions, so STB1 is, in my opinion, the tank to go. However, the problem is that this cap circle is covered by a building right here, and so you can hide in the south of the building and then make pressure with capping. So I found multiple situations in which my team was, you know, playing out of a position of advantage right here in the north, but my team did not have access to the cap one, and I simply got capped out. So this is why the south is also of some importance. Now, I would still go to the north, but you have to make sure that you assess the situation in which the adversary team basically leaves the north to your team and then concentrates only on the south, rushes into the cap circle and tries to cap the game. So in this situation, you need to flex instantaneously and make sure that you decap as soon as possible. Now, I would not play a heavy tank and go to this position right here, because you are out of the game. Keep in mind, this is the low ground right here. So from this position, you will not have the chance of making damage on tanks which are playing in the north, as well as tanks which are playing in the south. So you're pretty much limited. A damage pinata sitting here, stuck to tanks which can peek over the ridgeline and then take shots into you. So instead of playing heavy tanks, play medium tanks and make sure that you cover the northern side, maybe also the southern side. And then if you encounter, let's say, heavy tank players of the adversary team which are not playing smart, i.e. which are going to this lower ground here, you can perfectly take them out and create multiple crossfire situations. So in my opinion, just play in the north or in the south with the mobile tank, with an STB1 or maybe a Centurion Action X, and this is how you can win the game on this map. Secret Line is a map which I do not like too much, and yes, I know that this is not the correct template, because of course the cap circle is in the middle. However, the teams spawn in the south and in the north, and in my opinion, this is a map where you should bring armor to the fight. So heavily armored heavy tanks, maybe even TDs in some positions, and then medium tanks if they have enough firepower, maybe the TVP. However, the good thing about this map is, like, even if you get flanked, let's say you start in the south and you get flanked like so with the fast medium tank, and you are finding yourself in a position like here, or like here, you can then proceed into the city and then take all those buildings as cover from flanking tanks, thus creating an advantageous position in the city, because you will fight against a lower number of tanks than in the city if you will get flanked by a medium tank. So all in all, I wouldn't say that playing medium tanks is will lead to a loss. However, in my opinion, it is beneficial to play heavy tanks, heavily armored tanks in the city, and more often than not, I found out that the team which is concentrating on, you know, winning the city, more often than not wins the game. You certainly do not want to sit in a tank destroyer like here, or maybe even like here, because chances are that the fight will take, you know, in the middle of the city where you do not have access with your tanks, and thus you will be out of the game, and thus your team will have disadvantageous situation, and so you might lose the game. So play a heavy tank, maybe a medium tank, and concentrate to the position where the fight takes place. Next map is Tutsianki, and once again a fine line. Once again, the template is not correct, so you're spawning in this position and in this position, and not so much in the south. However, the cap spawn is, or the cap is right here in the middle. Another interesting map, and one in which I would say armor counts more than mobility, so you should rather play a medium tank, rather a heavy tank than a medium tank, and you know, man the city and try to win the city. I think that the northern portion of the map is not too much of importance, simply because you can hide, you know, behind the railroad track, but also in the city, and you will not get shots from the north. So if you play in the north, you will most likely be out of the game for too long. Now you can play in the south and make a flanking move with the medium tank, but this is a very fine line, because you need to make sure that you do not get overwhelmed by the adversary team, i.e. taken out, and then the adversary team has an advantage, can flank you, let's say, your heavy tanks, which are playing here, and then have or create an advantageous situation. But on the other hand, if you find yourself in an advantageous situation, you have to exploit this and instantaneously try to fall into the rear of the heavy tanks. And this gameplay is more difficult. In my opinion, you can also defend the city, so the city, I mean those buildings right here in the center, if you have a disadvantageous situation when it comes to medium tanks. So all in all, I would say yes, it can be beneficial to play medium tank and flank your opponents. However, you have to exactly know what you are doing. You have to be super, super cautious, and you must encounter the fight in a given time, because if the adversary team has won this position right here in the middle, then they can set up a defensive position, and it's very tough to pick them or to dig them out of this position. And so yeah, you certainly should not play a TD. At least if you play TD, play an assault TD, and make sure that you do not set yourself up in a spot where you can get crossfire, cross shots from the north or the south. And in general, play a heavily armed heavy tank, or maybe a medium tank, if you know what you are doing and if you can flank. Now, another thing is, you should not over aggressively push this artillery point right here, because chances are that as soon as you make this move, the adversary team will react on that. And I found out that it's actually most of the time the second team that kind of repushes this position, which is successful. At least you should not be, you do not want to be the first one pushing this position, because chances are that you will get repushed, taken out, and then of course if you get taken out, that's not what you want to see in Onslaught, because you will lose points over time. Alright, with Westfield, I think I covered all maps. If not, please let me know in the comment section. In my opinion, Westfield is a very one-dimensional map, and the whole fight, for the most part, takes place right here at the cap circle. It's a hull-down map, so you want to play a tank which is able to conduct hull-down gameplay. So, for example, the Super Conqueror, 60 DP maybe, even Kranwagen works on this map. But I like to play the STB1. Why? Well, I found out that chances are that there are two situations. Either both tanks or both teams try to conduct hull-down gameplay here in the north, or one team consists of more medium tanks and tries to flank either the long way like this, or the short way down below this ridgeline here, like so. And I had games in which my team was perfectly suited for hull down gameplay. However, the adversary team denied this strategy with flanking around and with getting crossfire into the rear of our tanks, taking us out and winning the game. So this is why I like to play the STB1, because it gives me the flexibility to react on this kind of gameplay. So for example, if I spawn in the north, then with my STB1, I want to only peek this ridgeline here and instantaneously fall back, not to take damage, and then see what the enemy team is doing, getting the first information of the adversary team composition. And then if the team is playing mostly hull down here, I can maybe take on the fight, or maybe try to flank for myself, make a flanking move for myself, or maybe relocate to a more northern position right here. Or if the team is trying to do a flanking maneuver, playing like so, then I can relocate more into the north to then once again set up a hull down position and basically create a trap for those flanking tanks, which are most likely not as much suited for hull down gameplay. So this is how I would like to play, or how I would play Westfield. And yeah, those are all the map tips that I have for you. In the end, it's always, of course, a personal preference of what you like and what tanks you like and what basically maps you like. So please feel free to give me your opinion in the comment section down below. Alright guys, that was it for today with the video about the Onslaught mode and tips and tricks to reach silver rank. What do you think about this competitive mode? Do you like it? Or do you hate it? And do you hate this level of competitiveness? And do you think it is a toxic gameplay? Feel free to leave a comment in the comment section down below. And as always, if you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. This really helps out with the YouTube algorithm. If you find this video extremely helpful, then feel free to support me via Super Thanks. This way you can make a one-time donation. You just have to click this button underneath the video. If you adore this channel and you want to consistently support me, then consider subscribing to my channel or become a member, once again with the click of a button underneath the video. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you next time in another World of Tanks video.